But Brendan, while we have you here, obviously, as I wax poetically about the Blowback podcast, you have an intricate understanding of the depravity of our foreign policy and the establishment that goes along with it. And you did a wonderful season on the Iraq War, and one of the many villains of that war was one Tony Blair.
Mm.
Now, Tony Blair is reportedly working with Jared Kushner at Trump's direction. Kushner's back. Remember when he was telling a bunch of Harvard people about all the real estate possibilities in Gaza like over a year ago, and now Trump is saying the exact same thing? Curious. So apparently Kushner and Blair are working together on this Gaza rebuilding plan, and the meeting also included a senior Israeli official because the only democracy in the Middle East, in heavy air quotes, wants to impose a government upon a people that they will have no say in because democracy.
Yeah, I ever since that whole idea was floated, I mean, I'd love to see them try this. I don't know if it's just something they're saying. I mean, it's obviously a very Trump style line, that we're going to turn it into a beautiful, whatever, like seaside development. I can't imagine. I mean, what, we're going to introduce American troops to secure a joint Israeli-American redevelopment of Gaza? Doesn't seem likely to me. And if that happened, that would be like, I mean, he got a little bit of flack even from the right for striking Iran. I mean, I can't imagine anyone, at least from the perspective of public opinion or even his coalition, being okay with following through on the idea of committing American lives in Gaza. But Blair being attached is never a good sign. And
can you give people some background on his role in the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, the Iraq War is probably the most significant place to start. He was the prime minister. It was sort of already the Clinton of the Labor Party in the 90s and then early 2000s. It was called New Labor, which was the idea that we need to get with the times and stop doing as much socialism or sort of Fabian British social democracy and start to privatize and start to deregulate and things that that was sort of matching up with what Clinton and the Democratic Party were doing here. But he's most infamous and became incredibly unpopular for becoming Bush's lapdog with Afghanistan and Iraq. And so some of the kookiest and most embarrassingly fake intelligence meant to justify the Iraq War actually came from British dossiers, including one that was claiming there were little green vials of deadly chemicals that was clearly lifted from a scene in the movie The Rock with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery. That was overseen by Tony Blair, not to mention the actual commitment of British troops and the selling of the war in general and the management of the war. So he has the Iraq War on his record. He also sort of was a part of rehabilitating Muammar Gaddafi before we rehabilitated him when he was for a second there an ally in the war on terror. Blair did some consulting for Gaddafi, and Gaddafi ended up going on like British shows talking about his little green book or whatever. Obviously, what came after Gaddafi in Libya was worse, but Blair's there for whatever largely evil and nefarious project or client in the Middle East. So it does not surprise me that, I mean, it kind of actually surprised me to hear his name, but it doesn't surprise me that he'd be involved in something like the American proposals for Gaza at this point.
How could it possibly be implemented? I mean, I'm not trying to downplay the horror of what they're proposing, but I mean, we're seeing real issues internally within Israel right now. We reported this yesterday, but like these poor reservists are exhausted from helping commit genocide, and they're like just not showing up. And there are talks about fatigue among the IDF, and there have been, I think, like suicides. And so internally in Israel, Netanyahu is going to have a problem trying to get these reservists to do the ground invasion of Gaza City, which it has been he's been ramping up to for quite a while. Like, how can Israel sustain this level of barbarity on so many different fronts? Not just, of course, in Gaza. They're annexing the West Bank as we speak, and they're bombing Syria, and like they also underreported, it appears, the damage that Iran did to them when they struck Israel. We still don't know the extent of it, but it appears fairly significant. So, like, there's got to be at least some, I mean, pushback within the region to this kind of thing, I would hope.
I mean, we're all sort of probably, operating off of the same guesswork when it comes to Trump. I mean, whether it's you and me or the King of Jordan, I don't know if anyone takes it seriously or knows when we should start taking it seriously. It was last year that Trump talked about the, turning Gaza into a resort or whatever. And I remember at the time just thinking, like, again, I would love to see them try to do that, because it obviously sounds insane. Not only for its moral, implications, but just that the one part of Iraq, to talk about Iraq again, the one part of Iraq where you could have like McDonald's or whatever and walk around and, not worry about getting blown up was in the bubble that was the green zone.
You talked about this in Blowback. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And otherwise, and that's a much larger country, but in some sense, an even harder country to fight an insurgency. Hamas is fighting a pretty darn good insurgency against Israel right now. And the idea that anything in the near term could produce the conditions for, again, putting aside the just evil of the proposition, that could produce the conditions for what Kushner or Trump or I guess Blair would be aiming to do is ridiculous. I mean, people would get blown up every single day trying to build the Cracker Barrel or whatever. So that I don't see that happening. And I don't know what Blair brings to this other than the prestige of a former head of state, who, maybe the Hicks in the administration thinks sounds smart because he's British. I don't know. But like, I just don't know what he has no particular prestige in the actual region among like, populations or even leadership in the Middle East. So yeah, it would be very unlikely, I mean, to imagine any of this coming to fruition. What will continue, of course, is the war and the extermination campaign by Israel. And I think they're saying stuff like this just to almost convince probably their own audience and then the audiences in America that this will be over soon. Right. I think that's why you start talking about Burger
Trump
King
has been saying I want to wrap he's obsessed with these imposing these self-imposed deadlines. He wants this done by the end of 2025. And what being done means is could be as barbaric as basically entire extermination, which is like what we're looking at here. I mean, like I'm a dog with a bone with this death toll thing, but it just drives me up a wall because I read the West, we read a packet in the news in the morning, and the Western press is 63K. They, like whatever. We've been lagging, and it's manufacturing consent for this genocide in ways that is perhaps the most pernicious piece of Israeli propaganda in the West right now, because it's across every outlet, because there's no verifiable information on the death toll, but like, use that figure because you don't have real figures. I get it. The press might do that. Immediate caveat needs to be, there have been analyses by Lancet and other showing that it's likely hundreds of thousands. It's part of why there isn't enough urgency in the public, and I'm not trying to say there would be a revolution here, but is because we don't know the truth. It's hundreds of thousands dead and more are dying.
I am a stickler about the death toll stuff as well. I do wonder if 63,000 doesn't upset or explode your conscience, whether 163,000 would.
Right.
And we do know that it's an unpopular policy to support Israel now among Democrats and independents. I think it's obviously a minority within Republicans, but across the board, it's unpopular. Does that matter? Probably not. I mean, as far as affecting policy, probably not. The Iran strikes were unpopular. They did them anyway. But yeah, I think you're right about the crack up that's happening because it's been 2 years now. And that to me is why, especially someone like Trump would start to say, don't worry, we're wrapping it up soon. That phrase, even wrap it up, like the way
Right.
to wrap it up, if he had the political or, whatever type of courage, he would wrap it up by cutting Israel off completely. And then they would, probably wither on the vine for a little bit until they had to really decide they didn't have the resources anymore to continue the extermination. But he doesn't want to do that. Or rather feels like he politically can't do that. And I'm sure he would get a wallop if he did, just like any Democratic president would. So he has to just keep asking pretty please to Netanyahu and say things like, oh, don't worry, it's only going to be another month or two, and then we'll have, a flowering of Western
Yeah.
style, like a new Paris. So you think, it'll take like decades. It'll take decades to even clear the rubble from Gaza, let alone this idea of like Sim City style, like reskinning the map to make it look shiny and full of Western restaurants. So to me, it's a sign of desperation. And I think the Iran strikes were another sign of desperation because they really, I think they realized that this is not really going to end well for Israel any more than it's obviously not that Israel is the victim, but it's not going to end well. It's a kind of death drive at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're creating in this frenzy facts on the ground, which is an Israeli phrase, to try to cement Greater Israel. I mean,
Yeah.
one, by completely destroying the Gaza Strip and either ethnically cleansing or outright just killing basically all of the Palestinians there. And then the West Bank actions are increasingly deadly, violent, escalating. The approval of this E1 settlement plan we've been covering on the show, and trying to create facts on the ground to further foreclose the possibility of a Palestinian state, although obviously, Brendan, you know that the two-state solution is fictional and a stalling tactic, but
Yeah.
even just like the diplomatic significance of a Palestinian state being recognized, they are sprinting to ensure that that's not possible. And I am optimistic when you say things like they're worried and it's desperate, but I also am not naive about what just sheer power and violence can achieve in a short period of time.
Absolutely. Same goes for America as well. I mean, I think we're living through the age of if there was decline before, free fall at this point, and it's you can be optimistic about certain aspects of that, but these types of states, whether it's a sort of lunatic ethnocracy like Israel or a dying empire like America, they don't go down without a fight. So then, of course, the concern is maybe they'll just, let her rip. And I think that is basically like Israel would have had a greater chance at Greater Israel if they had played this slowly and piecemeal over the next 50 years. I mean, they've already achieved half of Greater Israel, in as you say, with the facts on the ground. But instead, I think it's gotten to its terminus of like any kind of logical or strategic ethnic cleansing. And after October 7th, they just said, we can do whatever we want, not unlike what happened after 9/11 in America. And we saw how that turned out. We reversed whatever leverage we had in those countries through a series of ironic and or, blood-stained reversals. So, yeah, I mean, it does seem desperate, but that, as you point out, doesn't mean it's going to get any better anytime soon. They'll just
Right.
they'll just grind on.
Lastly, Brendan, I do think it's interesting to examine how the Democrats are responding to
Mm.
this. Like, the Torres interview is not a good look for him, and he comes off incredibly callous and sociopathic. Not hard for him to do.
Mm.
But we just headlined this story that this moderate Democrat in North Carolina is swearing off now and announcing pretty early on, in her race, probably to foreclose the idea of a primary challenger, I would imagine. I don't know the
Mm-hmm.
district that well, that she won't take AIPAC money.
Mm-hmm.
And you have like this exciting candidate that we've interviewed up in Maine, Graham Plattner, who
Latin, yeah.
is like putting no AIPAC basically to the forefront of his race. Like, and you even a guy like Charlemagne the God, who's just kind of like an independent vibe guy on TV or on the radio,
Yeah.
calling Jeffrey's AIPAC Shakur. The
Yeah.
fact that AIPAC is becoming a pejorative, and it's not just Democrats. Like
Mm-hmm.
Marjorie Taylor Greene says what she says because she's one of the top three representatives slash senators that take the most percentage of money from small dollar donations. Like,
Mm-hmm.
not saying she's not an anti-Semite, but her, Bernie, and AOC are the top three, and she's
Yep.
the only Republican calling out AIPAC. It's becoming a pejorative, and that, at the very least, domestically here in the U.S., is an improvement. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys talked about the Torres thing. It is a good, like, Adam's a buddy. I thought it was an interesting interview on both sides of that set. But Torres being this, just retreating into that like a gator, sunbathing, just like
Yeah.
he couldn't, like, he knew he couldn't blow up, and I'm sure he was thinking of like whatever staffer booked him on this and was imagining traps from the movie Saw to apply to them later, for in the moment that we realized this wasn't going to make him look hip and cool. But that lizard-like stance, I think, is incredibly alienating, and more people. I remember AIPAC was already becoming a pejorative because it was so linked with Republicans over the past 4 or 5 years at this point. Trump embracing Miriam Adelson, and just like I think a lot of Democrats, even if they quietly kept taking AIPAC money, they didn't mind accepting that it was now a Republican coded lobby for many people. But the extermination campaign in Gaza definitely, I think, has given certainly younger politicians an impetus to say, I never want to have to deal with this. Why would, okay, I'll take some flack for maybe being too sympathetic to the Palestinians. Maybe they'll call it genocide. Maybe they won't. That whole rhetorical war will probably be with us for a little while longer. But they have no reason to, if they're smart, to think, yeah, in 5 years, I don't want to have to be tarred with the fact that I took AIPAC money. And it's a non-starter, I think, if you're smart. Then you have people like Slotkin, who are, trying to in real time, transmogrify.
Retrofit. Right.
Exactly. And that's probably going to be unsuccessful. But yeah, it's good that it's become a pejorative. I hope it spreads to other forms of how this policy sustains itself, and the just the general support for Israel, whether it's a lobby or whether it's our public figures, whether they take AIPAC money or not. It should probably soon become a stain on your record to have said anything supportive of this. I know that leading Democrat, I can't remember her name at the moment, you probably covered it, she said genocide and then she took it back.
Yeah, Catherine Clark. She said it to her constituents and then ran to like a Zionist publication and backtracked it. Yeah.
So you can see it happening in real time. The younger upstarts know, let's just have a clean slate, and the ones who are already caught in this web at the top are trying to wriggle out of this in real time. So that in and of itself is a good sign. Yeah.
Not complete optimism in our conversation here, but we can leave it on that note. Brendan James, really appreciate you coming on, and everybody, as I keep saying, check out Blowback. Anything else you're working on that we should mention?
Well, I'm working with my buddy Felix I mentioned earlier. I am working on a mini-series with him, but it's about Metal Gear Solid, so I don't know how many Majority Report listeners would care about that, but we are putting it out this week.
We've got a bunch of nerds in the audience. They might be into it.
I would never call them nerds. Those aren't my words.
Well, I have to discipline them in some way.
I do the same with our listeners. But no, Blowback Season 6 is coming out September 20th. And it will be about the civil war in Angola, the Cold War showdown in Africa. We've never done a season about Africa before. It's incredibly rich vein and a fascinating story. So if you like Blowback already, please check your podcast feeds come September 20th. But if you would like a hopefully entertaining and compelling show about largely Cold War history and American shenanigans all over the world, check out Blowback, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right. Alex Hidell says, I will be listening, sir. So we already have one listener on board. Thanks so much, Brendan.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you coming on.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.